Hello and welcome to Personal Finance. I'm Kukuletu Cele. Today we're looking at something that concerns all of us, identity fraud and your finances. Joining me in studio is Lucas Venter, Manager of Analytic and Forensic Technology at Nedbank and Gari Dombo, MD of Alexander Forbes Insurance. Gentlemen, good to have you both today. I see both of you in your company colors, and that's a good thing. But let's get into this particular issue of identity theft. And Lucas, let's start off with you. What is it and the threat that it possesses to one's finances?
Well, there's no legal thing called identity theft. You can't steal somebody's identity in terms of the law, but you can actually do a lot of things with a person's identity. You get two different types of identity theft. In fact, you get the one where somebody goes and applies for some sort of facility at an organization on your behalf. The other one is where you already have a facility somewhere at an organization and somebody just impersonates you and then gets hold of that facility.
I take it the typical examples we're talking here, Lucas, to stay with you are what? Credit card fraud, maybe someone logging onto your internet banking profile. Is that what we're talking about here?
That's the second type, where somebody actually takes your existing facility. The other one is where they obtain an ID book in your name. They obtain perhaps bank statements or something like that, and they go to a company and they open up an account at a furniture store, for instance, and on your behalf. You don't know anything about it. The next thing you know, a month or two later, you suddenly find a nasty letter saying that you're going to be blacklisted for something you never even realized you purchased.
Gary, there are significant consequences here because it does impact on one's credit profile. Maybe if you can expand on that slightly, as well as the opportunity that it presented to an institution like yourself to provide some kind of insurance cover here.
Gugu, you're absolutely right. Obviously, we cannot, unfortunately, take away the trauma that somebody goes through, but the financial indemnity we certainly can take care of, and that's in response to that particular risk. We came up with a product which responds to ensuring that at least we can indemnify clients following ID theft, particularly if one needs to go through the legal area to defend yourself. If you need to clear your name, if, for example, there are debts that have been incurred, there are various limits that we can actually cover to ensure that we can respond to the risks that Lucas has alluded to.
What makes identity theft cover different from other insurances, especially when you go out to the store, you purchase what do they call it, credit cover, I take it, when you purchase
credit insurance.
There we go. What makes it different?
Sure. The difference really is when we look at ID theft, to a large extent, the theft that emanates from there, the damage would really be along the lines that you now need to start clearing your name, because your name would have been impacted, and obviously you'd have been blacklisted at credit bureaus, etc. So the cover then that entails on that is actually trying to ensure that you speed up that process in clearing your name. But there could also be accounts that could have been opened under your name. Obviously, there are debts that have been incurred under your name. We also, then the police will be able to respond as well, as far as trying to indemnify you in those circumstances concerned.
Maybe if we can expand on the preventative measures that are put in place by financial institutions. Are they enough, Lucas? And in the financial services industry, do we find that there are measures put in place to prevent identity theft?
We've put in place a lot of measures. Those only go as far as things that we are in control of that we can control. So obviously the data, your data that is with us on our servers, that we protect to the absolute maximum. We don't put your data into somebody else's cloud, for instance. It's all only in our servers, and we regularly test these servers to ensure that it's impossible to break into them. As well as just looking after the data, we also try to make sure that in our branch network, for instance, that that there isn't a chance that somebody might come into a branch and impersonate you. And for that reason, we've been piloting together with the Department of Home Affairs a whole biometrics rollout to ensure that somebody else who comes into a branch with an ID book doesn't just claim to be you, but that we can make use of things that are kind of hard to fake, like your fingerprints, and protect you in that way.
So the institutions are doing something clearly, the measures are being put in place, but as a consumer, especially those who are watching at home tonight, what can they do? Is there certain documentation that you need to have and put in place in order to defend yourself in the worst case scenario? Gary?
I think to the earlier point, I think there are a number of areas that one also needs to consider. The crime has become a bit more sophisticated. It used to be just ID theft in the form of your identity document. It has moved to cybercrime, which now talks to, for example, phishing and actually trying to get your documentation via the internet. So the risk becomes a bit more complicated. Key is you must be very careful whom you give your ID document to. In fact, I would go as far as saying, don't just give away your ID document. I think that's one of the important messages that I would send out to the public, because that's really your life. That's your passport to life. So if you give it away, it's easy for somebody to actually just go and clone that ID document and to use your name to actually commit fraud. So the critical issue is really protect your identity as much as possible. A number of interventions, particularly as far as the IT systems are concerned, are in place to try and ensure that there's hardly much hacking that goes on. But again, it's important that on an ongoing basis, you just check with authorities, particularly there are companies out there that do screening in terms of credit records, etc., to check whether there are any credits under your name, because you might be surprised that there are credits that are actually under your name and you were never involved in actually entering into those contracts.
Exactly, and that can impede on your relationship with your bank.
Maybe
let's go to that worst case scenario where you find out that your identity has been stolen. You check your credit records and you find that you have several accounts in your name. Lucas, where do I begin?
Well, you should begin immediately with the police. Nobody's going to believe you if you didn't open a police case. And obviously there's also the risk, I think, that there might be unscrupulous people out there who pretend to be the victims of ID theft. So you have to be able to distinguish yourself from those people as well. As soon as you found out, you have to immediately contact all your creditors and notify them of this. You need to maybe do a credit search on yourself to see what is out there. You need to approach your bank and inform them of this. For instance, if there's some sort of a debit order or something to that effect, that obviously needs to be stopped as soon as possible. And from there on, there's also an organization called the South African Fraud Prevention Services, where you can have your self-listed in a preventative way. In other words, they will then go around informing organizations that you have been the victim of identity theft, so that if somebody else goes and applies for something else again, quite often these guys they're not just going to go buy furniture on your behalf, they might do all sorts of other things as well, so they're not going to stop at the first company. So there might still be other stuff that you're able to stop once you find out about it. So making use of an organization like SAFPS that most of the financial organizations subscribe to, and which they check when they receive an application for something, that is an important step.
Is that for free though, or at a fee?
That is for free.
Okay, but something that is at a fee is the cover, clearly. Maybe if you can walk us through the kind of ranges that we're talking here. And obviously where South African consumers can find some kind of cover against identity theft.
Normally a number of companies have now introduced the cover under their own domestic insurance product. So it would be an extension normally under your all risks cover, for example, on your personal insurance. But you could also purchase it as a standalone product, and it's normally quite cheap. Legal costs are one of the big areas that we cover. So to protect you against legal defense costs, and these can run into hundreds of thousands. So
does that depend on how big the case is and how much these people might have spent on your behalf?
Correct, and obviously it also depends on the extent of the damage that could have happened in terms of how far they've gone in trying to impersonate you. So that is one area that would cover. If, for example, and then you also are away from work and it's unpaid, would normally pick up those costs. There's also then the costs of the credit itself that you have incurred, would be able to pick up that. So it's mainly legal costs. It's also the credit that you have incurred, but it would also extend to cover some of the other ancillary costs that you'd incur in the process.
Well, we've certainly said quite a bit, but let's wrap it up now. And Lucas, to start off with you, how South African consumers can prevent their identity from being stolen in 5 sharp points?
Well, I think they should try not to be gullible. They should be informed. They should trust but verify, as a saying goes. They should be constantly on the lookout for people taking a chance out there, and they should make sure that they check their bank statements on a regular basis. And
put the preventative measures in place from the get-go, I take it?
Yes, definitely.
Exactly. Gary, from your perspective?
If all fails, try and get out an insurance policy. It doesn't cost you a lot.
How much is this a lot? Eh?
Well, it's relative, Gugu. On average, it costs you about 15, 20 rands on limits of about 100, 120,000 rands a month. So it's fairly cheap.
And depending on the credit exposure you have?
It very much depends then on the credit exposure that you also have. So it's related to the assets that you're also insuring on your policy. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just to close off with, your key takeaway points from today?
I think key takeaway points is protect your identity as much as you can, because it will be difficult to actually to clear your name post the damage being done. But on a regular basis, also try and check if there are any credits that have been opened in your name that you're probably not aware of. I think that's important. Our advice is probably try and do that every 6 months. If you lose your ID document, I think it's important that you also try and just revisit. Check organizations like CompuScan, for example, they don't charge. You just check whether your name has not been registered with some of those organizations against the credit that you've incurred.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insights today. We clearly learned quite a bit that little green document does do a lot, not only opening doors, but also potential damage. Well, that's where we leave it for Personal Finance this evening. A big thank you to both Gari Dombo and Lucas Venter. Do remember that we want to hear your insights here on Personal Finance. So get in touch with us. You can tweet any of your comments to @CNBC Africa using the hashtag Finance410, or to myself @Kukumfupi on Twitter. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.